Why do we stay up all night to finish a novel? Why do movies make us cry over characters who don't even exist? And why do stories spread faster than facts? The answer lies in one of the most fascinating truths about the human mind. We are storytelling creatures. Today, let's decode why we love stories so deeply, and why narratives shape our lives more than logic ever could. From the very beginning of human history, stories were more than entertainment. They were survival tools. Long before writing, our ancestors sat around fires, passing down knowledge through tales. A story about a hunter being careless with fire wasn't just drama. It was a warning to keep the tribe alive. Stories carried memory, values, and identity. In a way, storytelling is humanity's oldest technology. Neuroscience shows why stories are so powerful. When we hear plain facts, the brain activates only language processing regions. But when we hear a story, something magical happens. Multiple brain areas light up: the sensory cortex, the motor cortex, the emotional centers. If a story describes the smell of fresh bread, your brain simulates smelling it. If a story talks about running, your brain's motor region fires. In short, we don't just hear stories, we live them. This immersion triggers oxytocin, the bonding hormone. That's why stories connect us emotionally. Research by psychologist Paul Zak found that people who watch emotional stories release more oxytocin, which makes them more likely to be empathetic, generous, and trusting. A powerful story doesn't just entertain, it changes behavior. But why do we prefer stories to raw data? Because the brain craves meaning, not just information. Stories organize chaos into coherence. Think about it. Life is messy, unpredictable, full of random events. Stories arrange these events into cause and effect. They give us heroes and villains, beginnings and endings, order and resolution. Stories help us make sense of the world when reality feels too overwhelming. Narratives also allow us to see ourselves. Psychologists talk about narrative identity, the idea that we understand who we are by the stories we tell about our lives. When you explain your childhood, your struggles, or your dreams, you're crafting a story about yourself. And the way you tell that story shapes how you see your own worth. A tragedy can be retold as a lesson. A failure can become the start of resilience. Change your story and you change your identity. But here's the twist. Stories don't just describe reality. They shape it. Politicians win not with data, but with narratives. Brands sell not products, but stories about who you'll become if you buy them. Even in relationships, we fall in love with the story we tell ourselves about the other person. Stories are the invisible strings pulling human behavior. Yet stories also carry danger. Narratives can manipulate, divide, or deceive. Conspiracy theories thrive not because they're logical, but because they're compelling stories. Our brains are wired to follow plots, even if the facts are false. That's why critical thinking is essential, to separate the story from the truth. So why do we love stories? Because they let us feel, connect, and make meaning. They transport us beyond ourselves while also bringing us back to who we are. Stories are the language of the human soul. And here's something to reflect on: your life is a story too. The question is, are you the author, or are you letting someone else write it for you? If this story about stories opened your eyes, don't just turn the page. Make sure you subscribe and like Mind Decode, because the next chapter we're writing together might just change the way you see your own mind.